These books are not for everyone. I'm reading them so you don't have to. Today I'm going to be talking about the second book. We're starting with the second book now. Tales from the Pizzaplex, Happs, the first installment, Help Wanted. So this story is about a guy named Steve. He works at a gas station. He wants to be a game developer. He's an aspiring game developer. He makes a bunch of random games. One day he's working at the gas station and this guy approaches him and he's like, "What's up? Come here. I want to give you a proposition." This guy works for Fazbear Entertainment. He's like, "Steve, I've seen some of your work. It's great. Can you make 4 games for us?" And Steve's like, "Huh?" And he's like, "We'll pay you a good amount. We just kind of want to shed some light, make some fun of some of the accusations that have come surrounding our company that are not true." Disclaimer. And Steve's like, "Yeah, that sounds great." And the guy's like, "Oh, but you do have to be in a secluded place until you finish all of these games. No one can know what you're doing." And he's like, "Ooh." Steve kind of has an internet girlfriend, so he's like, "I don't think I can do that. I'm sorry." And then the guy's name is Mr. Edwards. He's like, "Okay, that's fine. Here's my card. I give you until Friday to make your decision." So then Steve goes home and he's thinking about it. He's like, "Man, that sucks that I didn't take that, but it's okay, whatever." Then he gets a message from this girl named Victoria on this dating app because, mind you, even though he has an internet girlfriend, they're not mutually exclusive and they never see each other. So he's like, "This girl Victoria is really hot." So she messages him and she's like, "Hey, I'd love to get dinner. Do you want to come over to my place and we can have a date or whatever?" And he's like, "Yeah, that sounds great. I've never met you. Are you sure you want me to come to your house? You don't know who I am. Do you trust me?" And she's like, "Yeah, that checks out. Sure, you can come over." And he's like, "Okay." So then he goes to her house and it's low-key in the middle of nowhere. So he pulls up and he's like, "That's kind of weird. That's a big house for her to live in all alone, but it's okay." He goes in and he knocks on the door, no one answers, and then he's like, "Well, I was invited, so I'm just gonna walk in." He walks in and the house is empty, except for a fire alarm that's on the wall and it's ringing. And he's like, "God, that ringing's hurting my head." And then he passes out. Then he comes to and he's on a couch. And Victoria's there and she's like, "Oh, you woke up?" And he's like, "Huh? What's going on?" And she's like, "Oh, you got in a car accident a few years ago. You have these spells of memory loss." And he's like, "I don't remember that car accident." She's like, "Yeah, you have spells of memory loss." And then he passes out again. And then when he wakes up, he has kids. And same thing, memory loss, all this stuff. So he's going about his life with his wife and kids. Pretty good. He's making, or he gets approached by Mr. Edwards again. He comes back over. He's like, "I'm sure you remember the offer I made to you before. The offer still stands, but, now you can just stay here with your family and make the games." He's asked to make 4 games. And he's like, "Okay, yeah, I would love to do that." So he takes the offer and, he lives out his life. It's great. He starts to have nightmares and night terrors, though. So bad that they're, coming out of the walls of his house. And it's, really bothering him. He's scared for his kids' safety. He wants to get out of the house, but then there's a snowstorm and he can't leave. And DJ Dan, the music man, that's the only station they can get on the radio, so that's all he hears all the time. And it's just, really getting to him. Then one night, he's having really bad night terrors and he is looking around trying to escape and he sees the fire alarm on the wall and he's like, "I know if I take that out, everything's gonna be okay." So he breaks it and then the ringing stops because there's been an incessant ringing in his ear ever since he first passed out that first time. And the ringing stops and everything just there's nothing coming out of the walls anymore. There's all these weird tracks on the ground. It looks like tires. And then Victoria's like, "Steve, are you okay?" And he suddenly feels the need to hide. So he hides. And Victoria comes out and it's a robot. And his 2 kids are robots. And then he's trying to escape them. And they're trying to find him. But he can't go outside because it's still snowing. And DJ Dan, the music man, comes over the radio. And he's like, "Steve, stop running. Stop running. We can make everything okay. You can go back to your normal life with your kids and your wife if you just press the red button on the back of this radio." Steve presses the red button, and that's where the story ends. These books are not for everyone. I'm reading them, so you don't have to. Today we're talking about the second installment in the Tales from the Pizzaplex series, Happs. the second story in this book entitled Happs. And it's been about a month since I read this, so bear with me, please. This story is about two kids, Aiden and Jace, and they're at Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex, and they decide that they're going to go into the tube maze. And in the tube maze, there is an animatronic who is in there to clean them and to provide like assistance if needed. And his name is Happs. That's Happs. And he's basically just in there to make sure that like workers don't have to go in and constantly clean, and like the tubes are not a hazard because of how gross they are, because Happs is in there cleaning them constantly. So Aiden and Jace, they terrorize some kids, they scare them, and then they're like, oh, this is kind of lame, let's just go explore. They go explore, do whatever, and then they come across a part of the maze that's like blocked off, and I think it's Aiden is like, you know what we could do? We could bust through here because I'm pretty sure there's an area of the tube maze that's blocked off, and I bet we can get through. So they are like kicking it in and kicking and trying to get through, and then Happs comes up because he's coming to come clean like that area. And then for whatever reason, I can't remember why exactly, but Aiden gets like really mad, and he just like destroys Happs and is like kicking him, like beating him up, and it like starts to break off a bunch of the different parts and pieces in Happs, and the section of the tube that they're in falls. And then they end up in like an unexplored area, I guess, or like a blocked off area that is not connected to any other part of the tube maze. And something about the tube maze is if one of the pieces gets damaged, in between each segment of the slide, there's like a screen, not a screen, but like something comes down and blocks off that area so kids can't get in there. And after the section breaks off, it gets sectioned out so they can't get back into the maze. And then they have some fun, they're exploring or whatever. And then Hap starts to like kind of chase them. He's not really chasing them, he's just trying to like clean, you know, but then they start to think that he's like after them. And to make a long story short, they both get injured, and Happs does kill Jace. And because he's so like messed up and like his like, as you can see here, like he has these like hand looking things, it's literally big old claws or something. The protective part gets taken off whenever like Aiden's like kicking him and beating him up, so it's just like these like razor sharp like pieces just coming off. And he does end up damaging all the tubes that he's climbing through, so as he climbs through them, they get sectioned off, so the maze is getting like withered down like piece by piece, and he's having to actively try to escape Happs. And then the story just kind of ends on him being stuck in the maze, and we can assume that he does die because they can't find a way out because they've been blocked off from the rest of the maze. And that is basically Happs. These books are not for everyone. I'm reading them so you don't have to. Today we're going to be talking about the third installment in the Tales from the Pizzaplex series, Happs, the third story in this book entitled B-7. So B-7 is about this kid named Billy who, I think when he's about 4 or 5, is watching Freddy and Friends on the TV, and he convinces himself he's an animatronic. Like nothing can convince him otherwise. And this delusion lasts for about, I think, 16 years. We'll get to that though. So Billy's parents are disagreeing about the severeness of his delusions. His dad thinks it's really, really bad, and his mom is like, no, just let it run its course. They do end up getting a divorce because of this. Billy goes to therapy. The therapy doesn't help him. The delusions are like ruining his mom's life. Like Billy is doing very concerning things because he's convinced that he's a robot. He drinks motor oil at one point and has to like go to the hospital to get it flushed. And literally everything he does as if he is a robot. Like he's a robot pretending to be human. Okay? That's how this story is written. And his mom, I think when he's like 18 or 19, falls asleep in the bathtub and she dies. And she leaves files for Billy to upload to his cloud whenever she dies. That's like, this is what you should do now. Like, this is how you take care of yourself, whatever. And he does these things. He has money. He lives his life how he wants to. He just lives his life like a robot, pretending to be a human. And he gets to a point where he's like, I don't feel like my outside matches how I am inside. So he starts reaching out to surgeons who are going to perform very unnecessary cosmetic changes on him, and in the end he ends up getting both of his arms cut off, his legs cut off, and prosthesis on all four. And then he gets metal plates in his cheekbones to make his face more angular, and he gets his tongue cut out. While this is happening, he somehow gets a girlfriend online who just thinks that he's, like, really weird. Like, she just thinks that he's, like, strange, but she's like, he listens to me, and he's, like, responsive, and it's, like, great. But their relationship ultimately does end up ending because of all the extreme things that Billy's doing to himself. And the story ends on Billy waking up on what I think is his 21st birthday, and he looks in the mirror and he realizes that he is a human and he's done all these things to himself. And he, earlier in the story, he does, like, rename himself as B-7 because he's like, Billy's not a robot name, B-7 is. So when he wakes up and looks in the mirror on, like, his 21st birthday and he sees himself, he sees Billy. And he, like, has a breakdown. He cries. And he's, like, losing his mind. He goes to sleep in, like, an actual bed for the first time in, like, years. And then he walks himself to the junkyard, climbs in a car, and then wakes up and gets crushed by a compactor. It is important, I think, to say that when Billy does get crushed by the compactor, he is overjoyed at the sight of his own blood, knowing that he is, in fact, human and not a robot.